My husband's female boss called during our family dinner saying, "I need him tonight." He left immediately. His mother said, "Career comes first." I agreed completely. 3 hours later they both learned what really happened that night. The chicken was still steaming when his phone lit up. I watched Jace's face change as he read the message, his fork halfway to his mouth. Without a word, he stood up, grabbed his jacket from the chair and headed for the door. "Hazel needs me," he announced, already reaching for his keys. No explanation. No apology. Not even a glance back at the dinner table where our family sat frozen in confusion. The front door clicked shut behind him, leaving us staring at his abandoned plate. "Well," his mother said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "career comes first." She said it with such certainty, such approval, that I felt something cold settle in my chest. My 12-year-old daughter Emma pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate, while my 10-year-old son Luke kept glancing at his father's empty chair as if Jace might magically reappear. "Is Daddy coming back?" Luke asked, his voice small. "Of course he is, sweetheart," I managed, cutting another piece of chicken I had no appetite for. "He's just helping his boss with something important." My mother-in-law nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right, Scarlett. You understand how business works. Some wives would make a fuss, but you're smarter than that." I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the understanding wife. But inside, questions were multiplying. Why did his boss need him at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening? Why couldn't it wait until morning? And why had he looked almost excited when he read that message? Emma broke the silence. "Mom, can we watch a movie after dinner?" "Sure, honey. Pick something fun." Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories about finding your voice when you feel invisible. If you believe women deserve respect and honesty in their relationships, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. The rest of the meal passed in forced conversation. My mother-in-law talked about her book club, Emma mentioned a school project, and Luke asked if he could have ice cream for dessert. Normal family chatter, but with a gaping hole where Jace should have been. After dinner, I started clearing the table. His mother followed me to the kitchen, carrying the serving dishes. "You know, Scarlett," she said, setting down the gravy boat, "I've always admired how you handle situations like this. So many women would be calling and texting, demanding to know where their husband is. But you trust him. That's what makes a marriage work." I ran water over the plates, watching the soap bubbles form. "I do trust him. And you should be proud. Not every wife gets a husband this ambitious. Jace has real potential for advancement, especially with someone like Hazel mentoring him. She's quite successful, you know." Something in her tone made me pause. There was a specific emphasis on Hazel's name, as if she knew something I didn't. But I kept scrubbing the plates, letting her words wash over me. "How long have you known about his mentoring arrangement?" I asked carefully. "Oh, for months now. He's mentioned how much time they spend together working on special projects. Late nights, weekend meetings. That's what it takes to get ahead in today's business world." Months. He'd been spending months having late-night meetings with his female boss, and I was just now hearing about it. Not from him but from his mother. The children settled in the living room with their movie and my mother-in-law joined them. I stayed in the kitchen finishing the dishes and thinking. The house felt different with Jace gone. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the quiet before a storm. At 9:30 I tucked the kids into bed. Luke asked again when Daddy would be home and I told him probably soon. Emma hugged me extra tight as if she sensed something was wrong. By 10 o'clock my mother-in-law was yawning and gathering her things to leave. "Tell Jace I said goodbye," she said, kissing my cheek. "And remember what I said about being proud. You're handling this perfectly." After she left, I sat in the living room staring at the blank television screen. The house felt enormous and empty. I picked up my phone several times, started to text Jace, then put it down again. What would I say? "How's work going? When will you be home? Is everything okay?" But I didn't send anything. Instead, I went upstairs and ran a bath. As I soaked in the warm water, I replayed the evening in my mind. His quick exit. His mother's knowing comments. The way she'd emphasized how much time he spent with Hazel. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones, in the way my stomach twisted when I thought about that message on his phone. But I also felt something else. A strange sense of clarity, as if fog was lifting from my mind. I'd been the perfect wife for 15 years. Supportive, understanding, never questioning. I'd trusted him completely, never doubted his late nights or weekend work sessions. I'd believed every explanation, every excuse. But sitting in that bathtub, I realized something had shifted. The woman who would have spent tonight worrying and calling was gone. In her place was someone cooler, more observant. Someone who was done taking things at face value. When I got out of the bath, I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Jace's pillow still smelled like his cologne. His work clothes were scattered on the chair where he'd left them that morning. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. I didn't check my phone for messages. I didn't peek out the window to see if his car was in the driveway. Instead, I pulled out a notebook from my nightstand drawer and wrote down everything I could remember about tonight. The time the message came. His exact words. His mother's comments. The way he'd looked when he read that text. Then I wrote down other things. Recent late nights. Canceled dinner plans. Times he'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. Details I'd dismissed or forgotten, but that suddenly seemed important. By the time I finished writing, it was almost midnight. I closed the notebook and slipped it back into the drawer. Tomorrow I would start paying attention. Really paying attention. Not as the trusting wife who believed everything her husband told her, but as a woman who deserved to know the truth. I turned off the lights and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere out there, Jace was with Hazel, doing whatever was so important it couldn't wait until morning. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't going to assume it was innocent. The night everything changed had only just begun. The next morning, Jace slipped into bed at 2:47 a.m. I knew because I'd been awake watching the red numbers on the clock change. He moved carefully, trying not to wake me, but I caught the scent immediately. Sweet jasmine perfume mixed with something floral I couldn't identify. Not my usual lavender body spray. Emergency meeting ran late, he whispered into the darkness. I kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep. But in my mind I was already reaching for that notebook. Over the following weeks, patterns emerged. Tuesday nights became sacred for urgent projects. Thursday evenings meant client dinners that couldn't be rescheduled. Weekend mornings brought mysterious phone calls he'd take outside, pacing around our backyard while speaking in hushed tones. I started documenting everything. The time he left. The excuse he gave. What he wore. How he looked when he returned. The notebook filled with observations I'd never bothered to make before. March 15th, left at 7:30 p.m., said quarterly reports needed immediate attention. Returned 11:45 p.m., shirt wrinkled, cologne stronger than usual. March 18th, weekend team building exercise that required business casual attire and an overnight bag. The children noticed too. Emma asked why Daddy was always working and Luke stopped asking when he'd be home. They adapted the way children do, but I saw the questions in their eyes during our now frequent solo dinners. 3 weeks into my silent investigation, I attended the company's annual spring mixer. These events used to bore me, but now they felt like research opportunities. I mingled, smiled, and listened to conversations I'd previously ignored. That's when I saw Miles Henderson properly for the first time. He stood near the buffet table, tall and distinguished with graying temples, talking quietly with a group of executives. I'd met him briefly at previous events, but we'd never had a real conversation. "Scarlett, isn't it?" he said, approaching with a polite smile. "Jace's wife." "Yes, and you're Miles. Hazel's husband." We chatted about safe topics. The weather, the venue, how these corporate events all felt the same. He was pleasant, articulate, but there was something reserved about him. Something careful. "Your husband's been working quite closely with Hazel lately," I said, testing the waters. Miles paused, his wine glass halfway to his lips. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Recognition. He was gone so quickly I almost missed it. "Yes," he said slowly. "She's mentioned their collaborative projects." The way he said collaborative made my stomach tighten. There was weight behind that word, knowledge he wasn't sharing. "They make a good team," I continued, watching his reaction carefully. Miles studied me for a long moment. "Do they?" It wasn't really a question. It was something else entirely. An invitation maybe. Or a warning. "I should find Jace," I said, excusing myself. But as I walked away, I felt Miles watching me. We both knew something the other couldn't quite say. 2 days later, opportunity knocked. Jace had fallen asleep on the couch after another late night. His laptop still open beside him. Usually he was obsessive about closing it, but exhaustion had made him careless. My hands trembled as I lifted the screen. Gmail was open, logged into his account. I'd never snooped before, never felt the need to. But sitting there in the glow of the computer screen, I felt like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. The first few emails were innocent. Work schedules, project updates, routine correspondence. But then I found the folder labeled H Personal. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. Dozens of messages between Jace and Hazel dating back months. The early ones were professional, but they gradually became more personal. Casual jokes. Shared observations about coworkers. Complaints about their respective spouses. Then I found the photos. Nothing explicit but intimate in ways that made my chest tight. Hazel at a restaurant, smiling at the camera. Jace in a hotel room making a silly face. Pictures taken during their business trips that I'd never questioned. I scrolled deeper, my hands shaking. Hotel confirmations for weekend conferences I'd never heard of. Dinner reservations for 2 during times when Jace claimed to be in budget meetings. Text chains that ran late into the night, full of inside jokes and references I didn't understand. But the words hurt more than the evidence. In one message, Jace wrote, "Scarlett's been extra clingy lately. I think she's going through some middle-aged insecurity phase." Hazel had responded, "You're too patient with her. Some women just don't understand that successful men need space to thrive." I found myself mentioned repeatedly, always dismissively. The wife doesn't suspect anything. She's too busy with her little domestic routines to notice. Scarlett thinks I'm working late again, she's so naive it's almost sweet. The worst message was from 3 weeks ago. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd never settled down so young. Scarlett used to be more fun, but marriage turned her into one of those women who nags about everything. You remind me what it's like to be with someone who actually understands ambition." I sat staring at those words until they blurred together. 23 years of marriage, 2 children, countless sacrifices to support his career, and this is how he saw me. A burden. A nag. An obstacle to his happiness. I grabbed my phone and started taking photos of the screen. Email after email, photo after photo. My hands moved mechanically, documenting everything while my mind tried to process what I was seeing. A sound from the living room made me freeze. Jace stirring on the couch. I quickly closed the laptop, deleted the photos from my phone's recently deleted folder, and uploaded everything to a cloud storage account I'd created specifically for this purpose. By the time Jace wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, I was standing at the sink, washing the dinner dishes as if nothing had happened. "Sorry I fell asleep," he said, kissing my cheek. "Long day." "No problem," I replied, not turning around. "There's leftover chicken in the fridge if you're hungry." He made himself a sandwich while I finished cleaning. We moved around each other in the kitchen like we had thousands of times before, but everything felt different now. Every casual touch, every mundane comment, every shared glance carried the weight of what I'd discovered. "I'll probably have another late night tomorrow," he said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Hazel wants to review the quarterly projections." "Of course she does," I said quietly. He looked at me strangely. "You okay? You seem distant." I turned to face him, studying his expression. Was there guilt there? Concern? Or just the mild irritation of a man who'd been caught off guard by his wife's tone? "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was something else entirely. I was awake. Alert. And for the first time in years I was seeing my husband clearly. Not as the man I'd married, but as the man he'd become. A man who could betray me with someone else while convincing himself I was the problem. As he headed upstairs to bed, I remained in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. Someone who now possessed dangerous knowledge and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. But I was learning. And I was planning. The idea came to me 3 days later while grocery shopping. I was walking past the bakery section when I saw a couple ordering a custom cake with their engagement photos printed on top. The woman was gushing about how romantic it would be, how surprised her fiancé would be at their party. That's when it clicked. Jace's 40th birthday was coming up in 6 weeks. He'd been dropping hints about wanting a big celebration, something memorable. He kept saying how much he deserved recognition after all his hard work this year. Perfect. I went home and pulled out my laptop, opening a new document. Jace's 40th birthday celebration planning notes. If he happened to see it, it would look like exactly what any devoted wife would create. Guest list, venue options, catering ideas, decoration themes. But buried in my cloud storage was the real plan. That evening over dinner, I brought up the party idea. I was thinking we should do something special for your birthday this year. A real celebration. Jace's face lit up. Really? What did you have in mind? Well, you've worked so hard lately. All those late nights, weekend meetings. I think your colleagues should see how much I appreciate your dedication. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're amazing, Scarlett. I know I've been distracted with work, but it'll all be worth it when I get this promotion. I smiled back, letting him think his charm was working. I want to invite everyone from your office. Make it a real networking event too. Even the executives? Especially the executives. I want them to see what kind of supportive family you have. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into party planning with an enthusiasm that impressed even my mother-in-law. I rented the community center downtown, hired a caterer, ordered flowers, and created a guest list that included every single person from Jace's office, including Hazel and her husband Miles. When I called to invite Hazel personally, her voice sounded surprised. How thoughtful of you, Scarlett. I wouldn't miss it. Wonderful. I hope Miles can come too. I know you both have such busy schedules. I'll ask him, she said, but there was something cautious in her tone now. 2 days later, Miles called me directly. Scarlett, this is Miles Henderson. I wanted to thank you for the invitation to Jace's party. Of course. I hope you can make it. There was a pause. I think it will be educational. A celebration to remember, as you put it in your message. The way he said those words told me he understood something. Maybe not everything, but enough. I'm glad you think so, I replied carefully. I'll be there, he said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The hardest part was acting normal around Jace while planning his surprise. He kept asking about details, trying to peek at my planning notebooks, fishing for hints about what I had in store. It's going to be perfect, I kept telling him. Trust me. 3 weeks before the party, I visited Sweet Dreams Bakery on the other side of town. I'd called ahead to speak with the owner, explaining that I needed something very specific for my husband's birthday cake. I want to do an edible image cake, I told Sarah, the baker. Something that will really surprise the guests. She showed me examples of their work family photos, company logos, even wedding pictures reproduced perfectly in edible ink on fondant. What kind of image did you have in mind? She asked. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot I'd carefully edited. It showed text messages between Jace and Hazel, specifically the ones where they mocked me. I'd arranged them in a collage format like a social media post. Sarah's eyebrows went up. This is quite personal. It's for a very special occasion, I said. My husband loves surprises. She studied the image for a long moment. Are you sure about this? Once it's done, there's no taking it back. I'm absolutely certain. Can you do it? Technically, yes. But honey, this seems like the kind of surprise that might cause some drama. I looked her straight in the eyes. That's exactly what I'm counting on. She nodded slowly. Your call. When do you need it? Saturday the 15th. And Sarah? I need this to stay completely confidential until the party. Understood. Payment up front. I paid in cash. The week of the party, Jace was practically bouncing with excitement. He kept talking about how this would be the perfect opportunity to impress the regional manager, how a successful party might even help with his promotion prospects. Make sure you get photos of me with the executives, he said while getting dressed that morning. This could be really important for my career. Don't worry, I assured him. This party will definitely be memorable. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, but by afternoon the clouds had cleared. I spent the morning at the community center, supervising decorations and catering setup. Everything had to be perfect. The lighting, the sound system, the seating arrangements. At 5 o'clock I drove to the bakery to pick up the cake. It was beautiful, a large sheet cake covered in chocolate fondant with "Happy 40th Birthday, Jace" written in elegant script around the edges. The special image was hidden underneath a decorative sugar panel that would lift away easily. "Last chance to change your mind," Sarah said as she loaded it into my car. "No second thoughts," I replied. Back at the venue, guests were already arriving. I greeted everyone warmly, playing the role of the devoted wife celebrating her husband's milestone birthday. Jace worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, making sure everyone knew how grateful he was for my support. Hazel arrived wearing a stunning red dress that hugged her curves perfectly. She kissed my cheek and complimented the decorations, her smile bright and seemingly genuine. "Where should I put this?" she asked, holding up an expensive-looking gift bag. "Oh, you didn't need to bring anything," I said sweetly. "Your presence is gift enough." Miles appeared behind her, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit. He shook my hand formally, his eyes searching my face. "Thank you for including us," he said. "I have a feeling this will be quite an evening." Dinner went smoothly. I gave a heartfelt toast about marriage, partnership, and the importance of honesty in relationships. Jace beamed throughout my speech, probably thinking about how this would look to his colleagues. My mother-in-law dabbed at her eyes. "You two are such an inspiration," she announced to the table. "This is what real love looks like." Several people nodded approvingly. Phones came out to capture the moment. Everyone wanted photos of the happy couple. When dessert time arrived, I excused myself to get the cake. My hands were steady as I wheeled it out on the catering cart, covered with an elegant silver dome. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "it's time for the birthday surprise." The room fell quiet as everyone gathered around. Jace stood at the head of the table, practically glowing with anticipation. "Make a wish first," I told him. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles. Everyone cheered and applauded. "Now for the real surprise," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. I lifted the dome with a flourish, revealing the beautiful cake underneath. For a moment, people just saw the elegant decorations and started to clap again. Then I carefully peeled away the sugar panel covering the center. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Faces leaned forward, trying to process what they were seeing. Phone cameras that had been recording suddenly stopped. There, in perfect edible clarity, were Jace's own words staring back at him from the center of his birthday cake. Jace's face went white as he read his own words staring back at him from the cake. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then he lunged forward, his hands scrambling to cover the image. "This is fake," he said, his voice cracking. "Someone doctored these messages." But Mrs. Patterson from accounting was already holding up her phone, the flash bright in the dimmed room. Then David from marketing raised his. Then another. And another. "Stop!" Jace shouted, spinning around wildly. "Put your phones away." But it was too late. The damage was spreading faster than he could contain it. I watched people's faces as they processed what they were seeing. Confusion gave way to understanding, understanding to shock, shock to a kind of horrified fascination. "Is this real?" whispered Jennifer from HR, squinting at the cake. "Is that Hazel Morrison?" asked Tom from sales, pointing at the name clearly visible in the message thread. Hazel had gone statue still beside the dessert table. Her face was pale beneath her makeup, her red lips slightly parted in what might have been shock or might have been preparation for denial. But Miles was watching her with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry. Not hurt. Calculating. Like he was seeing her clearly for the first time and filing away information for later use. "Miles," Hazel said quietly, reaching for his arm. "This isn't what it looks like." He stepped away from her touch without breaking eye contact. "Isn't it?" The two words carried the weight of years. Years of late nights she'd explained away. Years of business trips that made no sense. Years of him being the understanding husband while she built her career on other foundations entirely. "We should go," Hazel said, her voice getting higher. "We can talk about this at home." Miles looked around the room, taking in the faces staring at them, the phones still recording, the mess of chocolate cake and devastating truth spread across the white tablecloth. "Yes," he said finally. "I think we should." He turned and walked toward the exit, not waiting to see if she would follow. His stride was measured, controlled, but there was something deadly in the set of his shoulders. Hazel hesitated for a moment, looking back at Jace as if he might somehow save her from this moment. But Jace was still frantically trying to convince people the messages were fake, his voice getting more desperate with each denial. She ran after Miles, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like gunshots in the suddenly quiet room. The sound echoed long after the door closed behind them. Scarlett. Jace's voice cut through the murmur of shocked conversations. He was standing beside the ruined cake, frosting smeared on his hands, his birthday tie askew. We need to talk. Now. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just a strange, calm satisfaction. Why would you do this? He asked, his voice barely controlled. In front of everyone. On my birthday. How could you humiliate me like this? Humiliate you? I let out a laugh that surprised even me. Jace, these are your words. Your choices. I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself. Those messages were private. Were they? Because it seems like your private opinion of me was that I'm a nagging, clingy wife who doesn't understand ambition. Was I supposed to keep pretending I didn't know what you really thought of me? His mother appeared at his elbow, her face flushed with embarrassment and fury. Scarlett, this is completely inappropriate. You've ruined everything. Have I? I looked around the room at the clusters of people whispering, sharing photos, spreading the story in real time. Or have I just made sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with? My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She'd spent years defending her son's behavior, making excuses for his absences, pressuring me to be more understanding. Now she was seeing the truth of what all that understanding had been covering up. Because you made me invisible, I said to Jace, my voice steady and clear. This is me showing up. I walked away before he could respond, collecting my purse from the gift table and heading for the exit. Behind me I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the windows as the party continued to disintegrate. People were leaving in clusters, their heads bent together in animated conversation. Some were still taking photos of the cake before they left, making sure they had the evidence saved. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages, missed calls, notifications from social media platforms I rarely used. The story was spreading. By the time I got home, 3 different people had sent me screenshots from various group chats. The image of the cake was already making rounds through the school parent network, the neighborhood association, even the book club I'd stopped attending months ago. Did you see what happened at Jace Morrison's birthday party? Scarlett Morrison is a savage. Did you see this cake? I always knew something was off about him. Remember how he acted at the company picnic? I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where I'd lived for 15 years. Where everyone now knew exactly what kind of man I'd been married to. The next morning my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. It was my friend Caroline from the school committee. Scarlett, you need to turn on the news. Channel 7 is doing a story about workplace affairs and corporate responsibility. They're using your cake as an example. I hung up and turned on the television. There it was, a blurred but recognizable image of Jace's birthday cake, with a reporter discussing the impact of social media on public accountability. But that wasn't the biggest news of the morning. At 8:15 Jace called me, his voice shaking. Hazel's been fired, he said without preamble. Effective immediately. Miles called an emergency board meeting this morning and terminated her employment. I sipped my coffee, watching a cardinal build a nest in the oak tree outside my kitchen window. I see. Did you know? He asked. Did you know Miles was more than just her husband? I had suspected, especially after our conversation at the party. The way he'd spoken, the authority in his voice when he'd said this would be educational. But I'd had no idea how deep his influence ran. I knew he wasn't just some innocent bystander, I admitted. He's the majority shareholder, Scarlett. He owns 48% of the company. The board does whatever he wants, and what he wanted was Hazel gone. Completely. Security escorted her out this morning. There was a long pause. I think, Jace said quietly, I'm going to be next. The cardinal finished building her nest and flew away, leaving behind something small but perfectly constructed. A new beginning built from carefully chosen pieces. I think, I said, you're probably right. 3 days later I sat across from Martha Reynolds, the best family attorney in town. She'd been recommended by Caroline, who'd gone through her own messy situation 2 years earlier. I don't want a divorce, I said, sliding a thick folder across her mahogany desk. I want something smarter. Martha raised an eyebrow as she opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of every email, every photo, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. Screenshots of text messages where Jace mocked me. Hotel receipts. Credit card statements showing dinners for two during his supposed solo business trips. This is comprehensive, she said, flipping through page after page. You've been thorough. I had good motivation. She studied the documentation for several minutes, making notes on a legal pad. Legal separation gives you all the benefits of divorce without the finality. Spousal support, property division, but you remain married. Is there a particular reason you're choosing this route? Control, I said simply. If we divorce, it's over and done. But legal separation? That's ongoing. Monthly reminders of what his choices cost him. Plus, he can't remarry as long as we're separated. Martha smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. You're not looking for revenge. You're looking for justice. Exactly. The paperwork was filed within a week. Jace received the documents on a Wednesday morning at his office. What was left of his office, anyway. He'd been moved to a smaller cubicle after Hazel's departure, ostensibly temporary while they restructured his role. He called me immediately, his voice strained. Legal separation? Scarlett, we need to talk about this. We can work things out. Can we? Because your text messages suggest you think I'm a nagging schoolteacher who doesn't understand ambition. I was angry when I wrote those things. You know I didn't mean them. Do I? Because they seemed pretty specific. Pretty detailed. Pretty consistent over months of correspondence. There was a long pause. What do you want? I want you to read the papers. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. And I want you to sign them. He hung up without saying goodbye. That evening his mother called. I'd been expecting it. Scarlett, dear, surely we can work this out without involving lawyers and courts. Think of the children. I am thinking of the children. I'm thinking about what kind of example I want to set for them about self-respect and standing up for yourself. But this public humiliation, it's not good for anyone. Can't we handle this privately? Like we handled Jace's affair privately? Like we handled his disrespect privately? I tried private. Private got me mocked in text messages. I could mediate, she offered desperately. We could all sit down together, hash this out like family. I laughed, remembering her words from that first dinner. You know what you told me that night? When Jace left us sitting at the dinner table. You said career comes first. I was just dash. You were just supporting your son's decision to prioritize work over family. Well, guess what? I finally agree with you. Career does come first. And this separation? This is my career move. The line went quiet. I'll be in touch about pickup arrangements for the children, I said and hung up. Meanwhile, I was rediscovering who I used to be. Wednesday evenings found me at the library for book club, discussing novels I actually had opinions about. Saturday mornings were for coffee with friends I'd neglected during years of accommodating Jace's schedule. You look different, said Rebecca, a friend from the kids' soccer league. Lighter somehow. I feel different. Like I can breathe again. Are you dating? Asked Lynn, always direct. Not yet. But the fact that I could freely, openly, without sneaking around or lying about it, that feels incredible. The financial arrangements were straightforward but satisfying. Jace was required to pay monthly spousal support, maintain the children's expenses, and cover half the mortgage on our family home. His lawyer had tried to argue against it, but the evidence of emotional cruelty was overwhelming. Your client systematically undermined his wife's self-worth while conducting an extramarital relationship, Martha had told them during mediation. The law is quite clear about support obligations in cases of marital misconduct. Jace's face during that meeting was something I'd never forget. The man who'd been so confident, so sure he could charm his way out of any situation, looked smaller somehow. Diminished. I can't afford this, he said quietly to his lawyer. You should have thought of that before you decided to mock your wife in writing, Martha replied coolly. A month after the separation was finalized, I was feeling particularly creative. The same bakery that had made Jace's birthday cake was happy to help with another custom order. This time the recipient was his mother. I had it delivered to her bridge club meeting, where she held court every Tuesday afternoon with the other neighborhood wives. The cake was elegant white fondant with delicate pink roses around the border. But written across the top in perfect script were her own words: "Career comes first." Underneath, crafted in fondant, were two small figures, a man and a woman embracing. Anyone who'd seen the infamous birthday cake would recognize them immediately. According to Caroline, who heard it from Mrs. Patterson, who was friends with Dorothy from the bridge club, my mother-in-law went completely silent when she saw it. She excused herself from the meeting and didn't return. She never called to thank me for the cake. In fact, she never called me again at all. That Thursday I received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. It was from a woman named Angela, someone I didn't recognize. "Hi Scarlett. I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I heard about your situation through a mutual friend. I'm going through something similar with my husband. Would you be willing to grab coffee and talk? I could really use some advice from someone who's been through this." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'd be happy to meet. Sometimes it helps to know you're not alone." We met the following Saturday at a quiet cafe downtown. Angela was younger than me, probably early 30s, with tired eyes and the kind of forced smile I recognized from my own mirror. "I found emails," she said after we'd ordered coffee, "between my husband and his secretary. I confronted him and he made me feel crazy. Said I was being paranoid and jealous. But you know what you saw." "I know what I saw. But everyone keeps telling me to work it out, go to counseling, think of my marriage vows." His mother actually told me that successful men need understanding wives who don't ask too many questions. I nearly choked on my lot. Did she really? Word for word. And I almost believed her. Almost convinced myself I was overreacting. Then a friend showed me the video of your husband's birthday cake and I realized, maybe I don't have to just accept this. You absolutely don't have to accept it. We talked for 2 hours. I shared my story, my strategy, my lawyer's information. When we parted ways, Angela looked different. Straighter somehow. More determined. Driving home, I realized something had shifted again. I wasn't just recovering from my marriage. I was becoming something new. Someone who could help other women find their own strength. The woman who'd washed dishes in silence while her husband betrayed her was gone. In her place was someone who understood that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is to prove exactly how capable you really are. 2 weeks after meeting Angela, I woke up on a Saturday morning and realized something extraordinary had happened. The house was quiet, but it was the good kind of quiet. Peaceful instead of tense. My children were still asleep and sunlight was streaming through the kitchen windows as I made coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Emma wandered downstairs an hour later, her hair messy from sleep, and actually smiled when she saw me reading at the kitchen table. "What's for breakfast, Mom?" "Whatever you want," I said and meant it. We used to plan meals around Jace's schedule, his preferences, his dietary restrictions for whatever fitness phase he was going through. Now breakfast could be pancakes at 10 in the morning just because we felt like it. Luke joined us, still in his pajamas, and we spent the morning cooking together and talking about everything and nothing. They told me about school projects I'd missed because I'd been too distracted by marriage problems. They shared jokes they'd been afraid to tell because the house had felt too heavy for laughter. "Mom," Emma said while flipping a pancake, "you seem happier." "I am happier." "Good," Luke said, stealing a piece of bacon. "You laugh more now." That afternoon I pulled out a journal I'd abandoned years ago. The last entry was from before Emma was born, back when I still believed my thoughts were worth recording. I started writing again, not about Jace or the separation but about who I was becoming. The email from Miles arrived on a Tuesday evening. I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was spam, but something about the subject line, "Thank you," made me pause. "Scarlett, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out because I owe you an apology and an explanation. I suspected Hazel was having an affair for months, but I chose to look the other way. I told myself I didn't have proof, that I was being paranoid, that successful marriages required trust. The truth is, I was afraid of what I'd find if I looked too closely. Your cake forced me to stop pretending. It gave me the courage to finally act on what I'd known deep down. Hazel and I are divorcing. She's moved out and honestly the house feels more like home than it has in years. I don't know if what you did was revenge or justice or just the right thing at the right time. But it freed both of us from relationships built on lies. I wanted you to know that and to thank you. We're not friends, we barely know each other. But we share something now. A strange, quiet respect for someone willing to tell the truth when it mattered. I hope you're finding peace in whatever comes next. Miles. I read the email 3 times before responding. Miles, thank you for sharing that. It takes courage to face the truth even when someone else forces you to see it. I hope you're finding your way to something better too. Scarlett. A month later, Angela called me with an update. She'd filed for separation using Martha's information, and her husband was scrambling to save his reputation. But more importantly, she'd found other women in similar situations and wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet with them. I keep thinking about what you said, she told me. About how we don't have to just accept being treated badly. These women need to hear that. That's how the workshop started. 5 women in my living room on a Thursday evening, sharing stories and strategies over coffee and homemade cookies. I wasn't trying to build a business. I was just trying to help women who felt as lost as I'd once felt. But word spread. One woman told her sister. Another mentioned it to her coworker. Within 2 months, I had a waiting list of women wanting to attend what one participant called my empowerment sessions. You should make this official, suggested Dr. Patricia Wells, a therapist who'd started referring clients to my workshops. What you're doing is valuable. These women are finding their voices again. I started small. Registered as a life coaching business. Created a simple website. Charged enough to cover expenses but kept it affordable. The sessions grew from my living room to a rented space at the community center, then to weekend retreats where women could really dig into rebuilding their sense of self-worth. The reviews started appearing online without me asking for them. Scarlett helped me realize I wasn't crazy for feeling disrespected. I learned that wanting honesty in my marriage wasn't asking too much. For the first time in years, I feel like I matter. 6 months after the infamous birthday cake, I ran into Jace at the grocery store. I was in the produce section picking out apples for a client meeting when I saw him near the deli counter. He looked thinner, tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide. His clothes were wrinkled and he needed a haircut. He saw me at the same moment and froze. For a second I thought he might pretend he hadn't noticed me, but then he walked over. Scarlett. His voice was careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Jace. Look good. Happy. Thank you. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to say more but not knowing how. The kids seem to be adjusting well. They are. They're actually thriving. That's good. That's what matters. There was an awkward pause. 6 months ago, I would have filled it with questions about how he was doing, whether he needed anything, if there was some way to make this easier for everyone. Now I just waited. I heard about your business, he said finally. The coaching thing. It's going well. Good for you. Really? He looked like he wanted to say something else, maybe an apology or an explanation, but the words didn't come. I nodded politely. I should get going. Take care of yourself, Jace. I walked away without looking back. No dramatic confrontation, no tears, no anger. Just a woman who had moved on, having a brief, civil conversation with someone who used to matter. That evening I updated my journal. Saw Jace today. Felt nothing but mild concern for his well-being, the way you might feel about a neighbor going through a rough patch. I think that's what closure actually looks like, not a big emotional scene but simply not being affected anymore. Looking back, I realized I'd learned something important about revenge. The most satisfying kind isn't loud or destructive. It's not about breaking things or making scenes. Sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is to prove exactly how strong you really are. I didn't break dishes or scream or key his car. I didn't spread gossip or try to turn people against him. I just served the truth, presented it beautifully, and let the consequences speak for themselves. In the end, I didn't just get even. I got free. I got better. I got a life that was actually worth living. And sometimes when I'm helping another woman find her voice, I think about that cake. How something as simple as frosting and fondant became the moment everything changed. Not just for me, but for everyone who needed to see that actions have consequences, that truth matters, and that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to stay silent anymore. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Scarlett revealed that cake at Jace's birthday party, watching everyone's faces change as they read his own words. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.